Welcome to Relish Books. Today is my sort of final for now video about Jane Austen. I am going to rank her books in two different ways: best written and favorites. And these are pretty loosely done because I just want to say I love all of her books on some level. And I didn't do a ton of in-depth study or anything like that. I made some notes while I was reading them, but these are just what I think. And if I put your favorite on the bottom, doesn't mean I don't like it. And something that I love about Jane Austen is that people do have different favorites. They're all good, um, and so um, if you could let me know your favorites in the comments, I would love that. I love to hear people talking about Jane Austen. I love to have discussions with people about it because the books are so interesting. They lend themselves so well to discussion. And yeah, so Jane Austen has kind of been part of my life for forever. I remember before reading the books, I read the books for the first time when I was probably like 13, 14, somewhere in there. But I was already familiar with these characters and these people. Most of the time in my family, it would have been a rule that we had to read the books before we would watch the movies. But there were some exceptions made in this case. I don't even remember exactly which ones or how much, because I remember seeing like bits of them because they were always around. You know, my family loved them. I remember, and this was also something that was unusual, but I remember when I was about 8 and my mom was pregnant with my youngest sister, she had these, the BBC movies just like playing on the TV in the middle of the day, which to watch a movie in the middle of the day was super unusual, and that I was kind of allowed to just hang around. I mean, maybe they didn't actually know I was there watching, but so I got to see these from a very young age when I would not normally have been allowed to, because for most kids, they probably, for young ages, probably wouldn't be able to understand them very well, or they wouldn't be interesting, and they certainly weren't that interesting to me at the time. And they have, adult themes and stuff. But I have been familiar with these people, these characters, famous lines of dialogue, famous scenes, famous settings for forever. So I love all of them, and they're all very special. But so I'm gonna rank them, and here's my set. Starting with best written, and I'm gonna move from worst to best. And again, I just thought of these like what I thought from having just read them. I didn't deeply dive into anything. These are just my impressions. So in last place on best written, so the worst written, I feel like this shouldn't be any surprise. It was her first of this collection at any rate, is Northanger Abbey. Um, a super fun story. It's super funny. It's almost purely comedic. It's comedic. It's sarcastic. I really like it, but there are a lot of amateurish flaws in it, to my mind. So yeah, Northanger Abbey. Second, in worst to best, is Mansfield Park. And I know there are people, been talking to people in the comments who love Mansfield Park, and I completely respect that. But I don't think that there are necessarily like the same amateur flaws in this one, like as in Northanger Abbey. The writing is better, but there are character flaws for me, and just a sense of Jane Austen is usually never boring, and Mansfield Park is the most boring. In the writing, in the characters. And I do want to say, I have kind of crapped on Fanny multiple times in some of the videos. And thinking back on it, I don't think Fanny would be such a problem for me if Edmund wasn't so annoying to me. Because like that's with that love interest, the way his character works, and I'm not saying it's like unrealistic. I could totally see a real person behaving the way he did, but it's super annoying, especially in contrast to Fanny. And I also just don't feel like the two of them they don't have the chemistry that some of the other characters do. So this one's just kind of a miss for me. Then next, and this is really hard because this is actually the one I read first when I was rereading these, and I was like, man, I think this just might be the best one. But as far as the writing, when I read the others, I have to admit, Sense and Sensibility is just not as well written as some of the later ones. There is a lack of character development, particularly of her male characters, that kind of hurts the book in some ways. Then we have Pride and Prejudice, which the top three, honestly, are all so well written that kind of picking which one to put where, they're all very, very close. Pride and Prejudice is amazing. She grew so much from Sensibility to Pride and Prejudice, in the dialogue and the development of her male characters. There's still maybe a little wanting there, but her books are almost always more focused on developing the female side than the male side, so it's kind of, even though Pride and Prejudice indicates two halves, they are not equal halves. Obviously, the emphasis is more on the main character, and I'm okay with that. I could use a little more development, but I think she did do a really good job in this one. I love Pride and Prejudice. And then Persuasion. This one is so well-rounded, really, really great. I didn't put it in number one because, well, I'll talk about that when I get to number one. But I love the characters of this one. They're super well-rounded, and I love the idea. I think it's a brilliant, I talked about this in my Persuasion video. I think it's just a brilliant idea for a book. I love the title. I love the idea. And then in number one, best written, I have Emma. And this could be a surprise, I guess, if you think about that Emma is actually one of the more frustrating, annoying, kind of bad person heroines of the whole bunch. She is actually probably the worst, morally, of the heroines. But I think that adds to the interest of the book. And one of the biggest reasons I picked this one, both Pride and Prejudice and this one are particularly on point in their dialogue. The way dialogue is used in Emma is so brilliant to advance the plot, to develop the characters. We have such amazing character development through dialogue in this book. So that's why it is number one. Also just the change and growth of the people. I just feel like it is all around the best written. So that is my best written, with Emma in first place, Persuasion in second, Pride and Prejudice third, Sense and Sensibility fourth, Mansfield Park fifth, Northanger Abbey sixth. So on to my favorites, and I am not really, I'm going to touch on it. I have kind of touched on it. I'm not really presuming to say which is the best book, like which tells really the greatest and best story. I'm not really going to go there too much. This is my personal favorite, my personal favorites, which I enjoyed the most, which is hard because I really enjoyed most of them. So starting again in last place, I think everybody's going to know my last place is Mansfield Park, and I'm sorry to all the Mansfield Park fans. I love that there are people out there who love it, but it's just really not my thing. I might love it more if it wasn't in contrast to the others, or I might actually love it less. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it gets better towards the end, but it's the most boring. The characters are the least interesting, and also I feel that they're some of the weaker characters. And you got to remember too, we're talking about there's stiff competition. We're talking about some really really great characters here. So when I say that they aren't great characters, I'm comparing them to some really really great stuff. So Mansfield Park is in last place. And then I have Northanger Abbey. I do think the writing is not as good as Mansfield Park, but the story was way more enjoyable to me. It is really funny. I feel like it has some flaws, but it's still funny. It's enjoyable. I really like that heroine. She is very different. I feel like I say that about all of them. Jane Austen was amazing at doing variety in her heroines. You don't have just this is the same person in a different setting kind of books with her. Not at all. They're all unique. But she is still, she feels different even from, if you have to compare all of them together, I feel like she feels very different, if that makes sense. Then Persuasion. And again, with these next three that I have, they were so close that if I was allowing ties, I would tie, I don't know, I would maybe tie these next three. They're very, very close. I love Persuasion. I honestly think, though, that the reason that I ranked it this low was mostly because I don't have as much of an emotional attachment to the story, if I'm being totally honest, because I didn't, like I talked about at the beginning, I grew up very familiar with a lot of these characters, but not those of Persuasion. I didn't read the book. I didn't really know anything about the story until later, and I don't know, it doesn't excite my emotions and interest, I guess, as much as some of the others, even though I think it could. I think it could with time. And rereading it was really a delight because it was better than I remembered. So I don't know. I love it. It just doesn't have as much of a connection for me as some of the others. And then Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. I talked about this. I put Sense and Sensibility next, below Pride and Prejudice. And I kind of talked about this at the beginning of my videos, how I kind of wanted to like Sense and Sensibility better than Pride and Prejudice. And there are things that I like better about it, but Pride and Prejudice is just better done. If I'm being totally honest, I love the ideas of Sense and Sensibility. I love the characters. I love the setting, but they're just not as developed as they could be. And I think I'm supplying the greatness of the movie to this story. If you just read the book, it is lacking in some areas. So that's why I kind of wanted to like Sense and Sensibility more, but I do like Pride and Prejudice more. So Sense and Sensibility, I love it. I enjoyed it so much. I read it so fast, so great. But as soon as I read Pride and Prejudice, it was like, okay, this is better. So I have Pride and Prejudice above Sense and Sensibility in second place for the best. Again, it's just so well done. It's better developed. It's got amazing dialogue, great plot. It's just an all-around great book. There's a reason that it's the most iconic Jane Austen. But in first place, I have Emma, which is also first place in best written. And this is interesting that I do put it first place because, like I talked about with the best written, Emma is not the most lovable character. She's not the most lovable heroine. She is more flawed. She is infuriating. She does some terrible things. She is so full of it. But I think that is why, in a lot of ways, I think that's why I'm putting it at the top. She has to change the most of any of these characters. I mean, Elizabeth had a prejudice. She has to get over that. She has to realize that she was kind of wrong about a lot of things. And she was like too quick in her judgments, and she did have to evaluate that and change that. But she doesn't have to as fully realize and change her character or change her mindsets as Emma does. As Emma realizes that she was wrong about absolutely everything. And how she has just, the chaos and havoc she's caused, balanced by a really, really superior hero. You think about the heroes from all the others, and no matter how great they are kind of there in support of the heroine. They're kind of, how do I put it? Like they're secondary. And I like that. I like the balance of that. I like how a lot of the time, like Pride and Prejudice in particular, they both have to change. He has to change even more. And so you feel like they're really equals. I really like that. But Emma brings this whole other tone. In that Mr. Knightley is so far above her. He is a much, much better person. He's a lot older and wiser, and so it's just a totally different dynamic. He is a completely solid character. I do wish he was developed even more. Just that we had more with him, especially earlier on in the book. But I think it's my favorite of the romances for that reason. It's different. And yeah, if this was kind of the normal way that Jane Austen went about her romances, it might not be as noticeable, but it is a marked difference. The difference in their ages, the difference in their just their mindsets. I think this is the best example of love, like I talked about in my Emma video. I think it's the neatest example of true love. Mr. Knightley loves Emma in spite of all her really awful flaws, in spite of everything, that he cares about her so deeply and so unselfishly. And then her willingness to change, to admit her faults, and her deep love and respect for him, even when, she thinks he's wrong and stuff. It's just, I think, the best love story. And since Jane Austen has many elements, but ultimately they're all love stories, that's why I put this one at the top. I think it's the best love story. So those are my rankings. Just to go over my favorites again really quick. Emma in first place. Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, kind of tied, but in that order. Northanger Abbey and Mansfield Park. So that concludes my Jane Austen videos. Thanks so much for watching them. I hope you enjoyed them. Yeah, and I will see you next time. Bye.